He never thought the game would change his life. Not when it started as nothing, more than a drunken challenge in the smoke-filled corner of a small-town bar where the ranch hands and oil rig workers came to laugh away their evenings. But when his friends had slapped him on the back and dared him to do what no one else in that dusty county would ever consider, marry the forgotten girl, the quiet woman who worked at the library and lived on the edge of town, the one everyone overlooked because she was different, softer, rounder, not polished like the beauty queens they were used to chasing, he had smirked, with a confidence that came as easily to him as breathing, and said, "Fine, I'll do it. Watch me," never expecting the words to become real, never imagining that the bet would pull him into a storm of feelings he couldn't fight his way out of. Because when he walked into that library with the swagger of a man who had never lost a hand of poker, never failed to charm a woman, and saw her sitting behind the counter with a stack of books taller than her hair falling loose from its pins, her eyes deep pools of kindness that looked up at him with the kind of gentle surprise he had never seen directed his way before, something inside him cracked, something he didn't want to name, but still he pressed on, turning on his practiced smile, leaning casually against the counter as if he weren't there on the cruelest mission of all, and said, "How would you like to have dinner with me?" Expecting a refusal, expecting her to shy away. But instead she laughed softly, a sound that carried more music than the jukebox at the saloon, and agreed, her cheeks turning pink, and suddenly the bet didn't feel like a game anymore. Suddenly the idea of seeing her again wasn't about proving something to his buddies, but about proving something to himself, about chasing the spark that had ignited in his chest when her eyes met his. So he kept going. Dinners that turned into walks under the stars, walks that turned into talks about dreams and fears and the ache of being misunderstood. And though he told himself it was still just the bet, that he was only passing time until he could boast to his friends, a part of him was starting to know the truth, that he liked her more than liked her, that her laughter stayed in his head long after he left her porch, that her hand in his made him forget the hollowness of every fling before. But he kept his secret, kept his pride, and when he finally asked her to marry him, it wasn't supposed to be real. It was supposed to be the grand finale of his foolish dare, the punchline that would win him bragging rights for years. Yet standing there in front of the minister, her in a simple white dress with flowers she had picked herself, her eyes shining with trust, he felt the first stab of guilt, sharp and merciless, because he knew she deserved more than being part of a cruel joke. But he said the words anyway, bound himself to her in vows that slipped off his tongue too easily. And in that moment he thought he was still in control, still the one pulling the strings, until the days turned into nights and the marriage that was supposed to be paper-thin became a living, breathing bond that wrapped itself around his hardened heart and began to soften it. Because she shocked him at every turn, shocked him by never nagging, never doubting, never trying to change him, shocked him by cooking his favorite meal after long days without asking, shocked him by tending to a sick neighbor in the dead of night, shocked him by carrying herself with grace when women, prettier by society's shallow standards, would have complained or sulked, shocked him by seeing through his bravado and reaching the wounded man beneath. And it was in those shocks, in those countless small acts of love and kindness, that he began to crumble, began to fall, until one night when she curled up against him, whispering her gratitude for a love she thought was real, he couldn't breathe because the weight of his lie was too much. The shame of knowing he had married her for a bet while she had given him her whole heart tore him open. And that was the night he realized the cruelest twist of all. He had started a game, but she had given him the prize of her soul, and now he didn't know if he deserved it, didn't know if she would forgive him when the truth came crashing down, didn't know if he had already lost the one woman who had shocked him like he'd never been shocked before. And that is where chapter 1 closes, with a man who entered marriage on a lie but now faces the terrifying reality that the lie has become his deepest truth, and he will either break or be broken when the secret comes to light. Viewers, if you're ready to see how love, born from betrayal, can turn into the fight of a lifetime, don't miss chapter 2, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the rest of this powerful story. Some spat at him, some laughed, others nodded because they had seen the change in him, seen the way he had stopped chasing barmaids, stopped wasting his wages on cards, started living for something greater than himself. And then he turned his devotion into work for her, fixing up the broken windows in the library she loved, painting the worn walls, hauling in shelves until his back screamed, all without asking her to notice, all without demanding her forgiveness. Just a silent offering of his repentance, and slowly the whispers began to change. The town that once pitied her now pitied him, saying he had been a fool, but maybe, just maybe, he was a fool who had learned the hardest lesson of all. And one evening, when the sun was sinking in gold and blood-red streaks, she came to the library and found him there, shirt clinging to his back with sweat, hands blistered and raw as he hammered the last nail into a shelf. And for the first time in weeks their eyes met again, hers still filled with hurt, his filled with desperation, and he whispered, "I don't deserve another chance, but I'm not leaving until I've rebuilt every piece of what I broke." And she said nothing, only turned and left. But she didn't lock the door behind her, and that small mercy became the fuel that kept him going, because it meant she hadn't closed her heart completely, not yet. And so the days turned to weeks, the weeks to months, and the library transformed into something new, brighter, stronger, just as he was trying to become, until one night she finally walked in, touched the shelves, smelled the fresh paint, and said softly, "You did all this for me?" And his voice broke as he answered, "For you and for the truth. I should have told from the start that the bet was the biggest mistake of my life. But loving you has been the only thing that has ever made me a man worth something." And she cried then, cried until her shoulders shook, and he reached for her but stopped, afraid to take what wasn't freely given, until she stepped into his arms and whispered, "Don't ever lie to me again," and he swore it. Swore it with the kind of conviction that only comes from nearly losing everything. And from that day on their marriage became something new, not born from a bet, not stained by shame but reforged in fire, stronger for the breaking. And the man who had once been careless now lived every day with a singular devotion, cherishing the woman who had shocked him, not with beauty or vanity, but with the sheer force of her grace, her strength, her ability to forgive. And in the years to come, the town no longer remembered the bet.